Welcome to the Loaded Goat. I'm Chris.
And I'm Aaron.
What do you want to talk about today?
I guess I'm hoping, did you watch Opie and His Merry Men?
I think so.
It's got a whole Robin Hood theme to it.
Yeah, I did watch that one.
Good. What'd you think?
Great episode. Opie content. Love it.
I'm a big fan of Opie content too, and this was a lot of fun. I think, it was interesting how because we've seen this kind of Opie and the hobo story before, Opie and Opie's bizarre friend before, but I think they did some fun stuff with that. I
think they did too. They really don't have, for being advanced on a lot of thinking about, a lot of different social issues, I would say that this show consistently doesn't like people that are out of work or homeless.
Well, I think
it's just always people are lazy.
I mean, I don't know if I can really argue with you on this.
We don't need to solve this here, but it is a little bit of a all right, guys, let's move on and try to find a different way to approach this situation. But we can get to that cow when we get to it.
I think the thing of it is there never really is a story about a grown man who relies on the help of 8-year-olds who really is a person in need. It generally is somebody who's always taking advantage of these.
But they're not 8-year-olds. They're Robin Hood's merry men, which brings us to today. Episode something.
Let's dive in. This episode first aired on December 30th, 1963. If you are a frequent listener and you wonder why the gap between December 16th and December 30th, there was an episode of The Andy Griffith that aired on December 23rd, 1963. Do you want to guess which one it was, Christopher?
I would love to know what it is. I think it was the one where he goes to college.
No, it's the Christmas episode.
Oh, that would make sense.
It's the one where they have that crazy mix-up. You ever seen that Friends episode where they're watching Three's Company and Chandler goes, "I've seen this one. It's the one where they have the crazy mix-up," which is every episode of Three's Company.
Got it. No, I missed that joke. If so,
yeah. So we open in the woods with Opie and his buddies playing Robin Hood. They have a fire. And it looks like they responsibly put it out, although I did see a little flame burning when they ran away.
For sure. I was sure that the episode was going to be about them burning down the forest, and then Smokey the Bear would come out and teach them boys a lesson.
Fortunately, that did not happen.
Thank goodness.
Yes, thank goodness. So they come up on a man at a fire who appears to be a hobo. And it turns out the boys were watching The Adventures of Robin Hood on TV with Earl Flynn, I assume. But they didn't get to watch all of it because it was past their bedtime.
Which I love that they were all like, we didn't get to finish it because we all have to go to bed at 8:30. There's just no differentiation, which is not what it was true when I was a little kid. I had an early bedtime. My friend would be up all hours of the night watching South Park, so there was no uniformity there.
No,
that's probably why there's been a collapse of the social fabric of America.
You think bedtime had something to do with it? Yeah. I think it was actually the kids who didn't have to go to bed. Not only did they get to watch Robin Hood, they got to watch Friday the 13th Part 5. I mean, I think that might have been what the part of the social fabric issue was. But I do think it is kind of frustrating for a kid. There's no VCR. There isn't anything. And it's kind of it's not like you can stream it, The Adventures of Robin. You're halfway through, go to bed. That kind of stinks.
You're well, cool. I guess I'll read all of TV Guide for the next 5 years.
Yeah, there you go. So the man offers to tell the story because he says he knows the Robin Hood story, but he learns that they have their own lunch of root beer and beans, and beanie weenies, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And they gets them to bring them lunch, and we know that this guy's just kind of taking them for a ride.
Yep.
He's played by an actor named Douglas Fowley, who is best remembered for playing Doc Holliday in The Life and Legend of Wyatt Earp, which ran on TV from the 50s to the early 60s.
Okay, you've talked about that show before, I believe.
I don't think so. I don't think I have.
All right, take that back.
Yeah. He was married 8 times, had 6 children. Have you seen The Runaways, the movie?
No.
Okay. Well, if you've seen the movie The Runaways, his son was named Kim Fowley, and he is played by Michael Shannon and the Runaways.
Oh, no,
And
I don't know that.
The Runaways had a very, obviously, you know who the Runaways were. They were the all-girl rock band, hard rock band. It was Joan Jett, Lita Ford,
Brandon Flowers.
Yeah, that's thank you. Those were who were in the manager. Kim Fowley was allegedly very abusive.
Okay.
And
okay.
Yeah. So anyway, that's the connection there.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
I love that. Honestly, once you started saying Runaways, the reason I said Brandon Flowers is I've been listening to some old Killers and aren't we all just runaways? That's just been playing in my head on loop right now. So I'm here.
I really wish there would be some time I could bring something up that has to do with something in pop culture that happened in the last 20 years. And you would know what I'm talking about.
That would be nice. It
really would be. I mean, I'm not even asking for the last 50 years. I'm just asking for like the last 20 years.
Yeah. We'll see.
I'm not holding my breath. So later he tells the story of Robin Hood and how Robin Hood robbed from the rich and gave to the poor. And then he tells the boys he's poor and has a bad leg because he saved a baby from being run over by a train.
Which the story reminds me a little bit of the Frank Costanza line where he's talking about George is trying to figure out if his parents have any money, and they're like, and when his parents are going to pass, and they're like, and Aunt passed early on in life too, and they're like, Aunt Baby, and the way that he talked about, and I threw that baby, just reminded me of Aunt Baby, and so.
Well, it reminds me of the time Newman, remember the time Newman Kramer trades the defective police detective.
Yeah.
And he gets pulled over with a speeding ticket and he makes Kramer go with him to court. And
I wanted to be a banker.
And then Newman's doing his testimony. He goes, I was going this way. I do charity work for the blind. And, it's just all a bunch of ridiculousness.
Totally.
But if you were really all in on his saving the baby from being run over by the train story, he gives himself away when he says he fractured his patella oblongata.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And he points to his shin.
Yeah.
Patella, maybe.
Yeah. But then he talks about why Robin Hood was so great because he robbed from the rich and gave to the poor like him.
I also liked when he was talking about, it's like, oh yeah, I know the story of Robin Hood. And I was like, man, I don't think I could tell a whole story of Robin Hood. And then his story is that he robbed from the rich and gave to the poor. I was like, well, yeah, I think they got that part of the movie.
Well, the funny thing is, they're always like, he robbed from the rich and gave to the poor. I mean, I kind of like he robbed from the evil and did a lot of and he was really more like a guerrilla fighter than he was like a guy who robbed from the rich and gave to the poor.
I've often thought that historical books about FARC in Colombia are very similar to Robin Hood. Is that what you're trying to say?
That is not what I'm trying to
me
say.
Neither, just for the record.
You heard it here first. Christopher
no, you didn't.
Compared the FARC to a Robin Hood. All right. So he then learns that Opie's dad is a sheriff and asks him to not tell him about his place because he says people won't understand, which in his mind, they probably won't.
Yeah, I agree.
So at the Taylor household, Opie asks if they are rich, and Andy says, you don't get rich being a sheriff. And Barney has a good one-liner. He says, yeah, but you get investigated if you become rich, which is really funny.
It's a great line. And he and Barney, they giggle and giggle and giggle.
They have a good laugh. They have a very good laugh, yeah. And they start talking about wealth, how wealth is not all about material things. And
Barney really falls in love with his.
Oh, I mean, it's just like, what I'm trying to say, open. Then Opie then says the sheriff of Nottingham was a bad guy, and they're all a little caught off guard, which is also another thing that's so weird. I mean, like, I feel like the Robin Hood story of robbing from the rich and giving to the poor is very simplified, but we all agree the sheriff of Nottingham is a bad guy.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, so the whole thing's a little nuts. Aunt Bee asks if they want an apple pie or a slice of apple pie. Opie declines, and then they all do as well, and then Opie asks to leave to go play.
They must all be, I don't know. It was there was a little rude, right? So making an apple pie is no small feat, and then everyone's like, nah, whatever, I'm fine.
I mean,
eat a little bit, have a sliver. Only one person at the table can do that.
I think the thing about it is, I mean, do we not think that Aunt Bee gets taken for granted from time to time?
We do, in fact.
Yeah, I mean, there's two things. We assume we assume all vagrants are lazy, and we take Aunt Bee for granted. Those are mainstays of the Andy Griffith
And
show.
anytime we forget that, they beat us over the head with an episode where some swindler comes and grifts Aunt Bee to Kingdom Come,
so she can be appreciated again. I mean, that's really what it boils down to. So Andy asks Barney if he read Robin Hood, and Barney says he did because he was an avaricious reader. And then, which is so funny, because Barney always is great with the malapropisms. And then he says Opie had it all wrong because the sheriff in Robin Hood was the bad guy. Which Andy then goes, yeah, well, the sheriff was a bad guy. And he goes, he was fat and stupid with a stupid deputy. He just says it over and over and over. And Barney just gets upset. And now he's all for book banning in schools.
Yeah. This is a fun progression.
Yeah. So back at the hobos camp, they all bring him food, including Aunt Bee's apple pie. When I say they, I mean all the boys.
Yep. And
it's clear that he's taking them for a ride because he doesn't even bother to say grace, even though he did earlier. And, it's clear that this man's just grifting. And then we go to commercial. So now that we're in the break, we're going to do our favorite Robin Hoods.
All right.
You go first.
The animated Robin Hood.
From Disney?
Yeah.
All right. That's number 5 for you?
Yeah.
Okay, number 5 for me is Earl Flynn.
From the non-animated.
From the original, from the one in the 30s.
Okay.
Earl Flynn is kind of like I don't know if he would ever last today. He just always walked around with a mustache and a big grin on his face and seemed like he would get slaughtered in any sort of fight today because he was a little bit too much of a dandy. But in the 30s, and 30s and 40s, he seemed to work.
Got it. And this is probably the one that they're talking about.
Yes.
You think? Okay. All right. My number 4 is Inigo Montoya from The Princess Bride.
He's not Robin Hood.
Okay.
I didn't say your favorite people who wielded swords. I said Robin Hoods.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it'll get worse then.
Okay, that's great. Number 4 for me is Carrie Elways, who plays Robin Hood in Robin Hood Men in Tights. Also in The Princess Bride, but I picked a movie where somebody's actually Robin Hood.
All right. So I chose for my number 3, Douglas O'Donnell, the IRS director.
What? You talking about real life?
Well, isn't that a line in the show where they talk about, we do it through taxes? The take in from the rich and give it to the poor.
He does say we do, if we give to the poor, we do it through paying taxes.
So who better than the IRS director?
I mean, you could, if you really are wanting to talk about this, if you're really wanting to get to, you could talk about the director of Medicaid. You could talk about the Secretary of Agriculture who administers food stamps.
Yeah, totally.
Or you could have done what I asked you to do and picked 5 guys who played Robin Hood.
Yeah. All right. Who's your number 3?
Number 3 is Sean Connery, who played an older Robin Hood in Robin and Marion.
Okay.
And Robert Shaw played the Sheriff of Nottingham. It was a good movie.
Okay. Was he lazy?
No, he was not lazy.
Okay. I think it's clear that you've seen a lot more Robin Hood movies than I have. My second one is Robin Hood from Robin Hood Men in Tights.
Carrie Elways.
Yes.
All right.
Carrie Elways in my heart.
There are so many funny lines from that movie. Do you have a favorite?
No, I mean, the one that Robin Hood Men in Tights.
One of mine is where the Sheriff of Nottingham goes, all right, Loxley, walk this way. Starts walking off at a strut, and everybody else starts walking behind him at a strut. It's just because he's, it's just really funny.
Yeah.
All right. Number 2 for me is Frank Sinatra from Robin and the Seven Hoods. So it's basically a musical version that's told as, with him being a 1930s gangster, and the Rat Pack is part of his crew.
Oh, was that good? Was that fun?
I mean, it's a Rat Pack movie, so it's just kind of all them all there. The script's not that good, and they're all goofing around, but it's Frank Sinatra being Frank Sinatra.
Okay, all right. My number 1, not from film, okay, but
the Fark is that who your number 1 is?
Oh, I'm never going to live that down.
Yeah.
No, from The Sword and the Stone, they call him Robin Good, and then Robin Hood was just by a mispronunciation, and that's why he got to be known by that. But he was Robin Good because he was a good man. Long book. I give everybody a big up by being able to quote that, not having to read all that book. The sword doesn't come into it till like 515th page out of 516.
Have you really read the book? There's not even a book, The Sword and the Stone, is there?
Yes, there is.
There is not. I thought it was Mort's D. Arthur is what the name of the whole thing is.
There is. And Robin Good.
Robin Good. Are you talking about the Disney animated thing?
No, it's a real book.
With pictures?
There are really beautiful drawings at the beginning of every chapter.
All right. Well, number one for me, this is probably a controversial pick, but not any more ridiculous than any of yours. And it's Kevin Costner from Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. That was kind of my first real Robin Hood exposure.
John Dutton action over here. Okay.
I enjoyed the movie. Alan Rickman was a great sheriff of Nottingham. It was a lot of fun.
Cool. All right. I have seen none of those.
And this was as usual. This was, as Alan Newsom would say, it was a list.
It was.
So after the break, Andy is on the phone with Miss Porter, who says she's missing a ham. Aunt B comes in and says the apple pie is missing, and that other people have lost food as well.
Do you think that Miss Porter called as like from parent to parent, or she was reporting a theft of a missing ham?
Well, he was calling. I feel like to be calling Andy at the sheriff's department, or aren't you doing both?
Yeah, I guess. But like reporting a missing ham is like one thing for a police, but it makes more sense of like, hey, I think our kids are being little gremlins.
Yeah, I think on some of this stuff, it's, if we're talking about to go back to last week's citizen's arrest, or just law, as you hear about with law enforcement when they talk about, you talk about The Wire, they say, I just finished watching the limited series, We Own This City, and they talk about really information is critical in police work. It's just passing along saying this is missing. I'm not going to lose any sleep over it, but if there's a string of things going on, you should be aware.
Really astute. All right. I'll yield the floor.
Thank you. I tried. So, not very astute. Barney hears about Aunt B's apple pie being missing and other people losing food and says he thinks it's a fox.
They're crafty creatures.
They are crafty.
They're sly.
They're crafty. Have I told you about the fox that was in my backyard?
No. Do you want to?
I'll tell you about it. There was a fox in my backyard, and it was mangy. And they ended up speaking with some folks, and they said, well, you should try to trap it. And I connected with this person who put a trap in my backyard. And one morning I come out, trap's down, and I'm like, oh, I've caught the fox. We can get the fox taken care of, because the fox had the mange. He was just very sickly looking. I walk out, and then I find a very portly raccoon.
Really?
Yeah. And he looks like this. And, he's very embarrassed, it seems like. But so I let him go.
Well, they're kind of nasty, though. Were you supposed to let that thing out?
Not really. It's not going to attack me. He just wanted to get out of there. And then a couple of nights later, I come home and it's down again. And then there's another raccoon that I caught.
Different character? You should start tagging him.
Yeah, he's very nimble, and he's climbing on there, and I had to slap his paws to get him to get out of the cage. Still never caught a fox.
Wow, that's a fun story. I like that.
Good. I'm glad you like it. So Andy B gets scared, runs off. Andy dispels Barney's theory by asking how could a fox open a refrigerator door, which is a legitimate question.
Yeah, for sure.
And Andy has already figured out that Opie and his merry men are stealing food. It doesn't take Sherlock Holmes to get to the bottom of this.
Totally.
And he says he'll ask Opie, but Barney insists on questioning him, and he'll trick him into talking by playing checkers, and Andy tells him not to. So this kind of reminds me of...
good on the court.
Yeah. So there's this kid in my neighborhood, and his parents said I could tell this story, but he's got to be... I've just got to mention that they're very smart, good parents. But this this child took a toy and shoved a piece of it into his ear and let it sit there to the point where they had to basically go and get it surgically removed because skin was growing over it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Now, he has been very, very cagey about how the toy got in his ear. I think he said at some point it just happened to fall in there. And I mean, or something like that. It's been kind of a ridiculous thing. I mean, my theory on this is he took the toy, he put it in his ear just on a lark or on a whatever. And it just kept going further down as he tried to get it out.
Yeah, I think so too.
Now, I have offered to help with the interrogation.
Oh, wow.
But because they said no, he will wait you out. He will go in 15 different directions, and you will not be able to keep. And he will just run the clock out on you. Which I know this kid. I think they're right.
How old is he?
He's like 7 or 8.
Okay, yeah, that's a tough one.
Yeah. So I've heard that my services are not needed. I'm not going to push on this, but this kind of reminds me when you're talking about interrogation of what Barney's trying to do here.
Totally, I agree. That's fun. You've had 2 good stories. Good for you. Your life is interesting.
Thank you. I try. So later, Barney already has his checkerboard set up when Opie comes in because he's not going to take Andy's advice because he thinks he knows better. And he gets Opie to play, and he starts fishing. And the hilarious thing about this is so well done because his plan works and Opie shares everything. But the problem is that he also slaughters Barney at checkers. So Barney doesn't hear a word he says.
It worked. Yeah, it's fun. It's fun to watch.
Yeah. So all Andy has to do is come in and he asks Opie about the apple pie and the other food. And Opie admits they took it. And he shares that they've been giving it to the hobo because they have been robbing from the rich and giving to the poor. And Andy explains that stealing is stealing and that they are too young to take the law into their own hands.
It's against the law to take the law into your own hands, right?
Yeah, I mean, what is a good age to know if you can take the law into your own hands?
Definitely 16.
16, okay. I think 75.
Yeah, no, I think so too.
75-year-olds just are like, I'm not following the law anymore.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Or they can just say, or there's like Uncle Leo would say, I'm an old man, I'm confused. I mean, there's really, I don't know. I don't really know if there is a good age to take the law into your own hands.
It goes hand in hand with stealing batteries.
Yeah. So, and then Andy, of course, as you mentioned, explains that taxes are a way of taking from the rich and giving to the poor. Some would argue that it's taking from the middle class and giving to the poor, but it's still a way of
redistribution.
It's still a redistribution.
Working on it.
Yeah. So Andy says that the man is able-bodied. He shouldn't need people to steal for him, which is fair, but also goes back to your earlier statement. And Opie explains the man's ailment. And Andy, of course, knows the score, but he says they'll go to help him. And so Andy, Barney, and the kids show up to help him, and he is sleeping. And when he's awake, Andy says they'll take him down to the county employment office just to get him a job. And it's clear he doesn't want to work. And Andy finally offers to take him into town and let him stay until he finds him a job. And let him stay with him until he finds him a job. And they even offer to move him. And as they go to get his stuff, the hobo just sprints off into the woods, and Opie and the boys are stunned.
He also runs a little bit like Ernest T. Bass.
He runs a little wild, yeah. Yeah, he's not... I mean, he would not... for all of his lack of... for all of his just lack of get up and go, he's not like Ernest T. Bass. I would not want to get into a fight with him.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah. And Barney says he gave himself away because the patula oblongata is not in your leg. It's in your brain.
Super smart.
Yeah.
Not wrong.
No. And we go to commercial. So in the epilogue, Opie is helping Andy put up wanted posters. And Opie asks if it is okay to tell a lie, like when he promised all those jobs when he didn't have any to offer. And Andy tries to explain himself, and then he just says he doesn't have a leg to stand on. And Opie says that's okay because he makes mistakes too.
I love it. So cute.
Yeah. So how many whistles would you give this?
9.
9?
Yeah, you?
I'd give it 8.
All right. Okay. I thought it was fun. It was great.
Yeah. I just didn't know if the hard-hitting, unforgiving statement on the homeless really turned you off about this episode.
Well, it's not a 10, but we're not here to do social commentary. We're here to see, how much we enjoyed watching the show, and I enjoyed watching it. I just wanted to at least lay out that the writers are a touch lazy on this piece.
So I think the big takeaway for viewers and listeners of this podcast is Christopher really thinks this show is really culturally outdated and culturally insensitive to homeless people. And he thinks the FARC is just a modern day Robin Hood.
I'm struggling with this because I don't want that to be anything people associate with me, but I also think it's such a good joke.
It is a good joke. It is a good joke. I don't
that I'm not willing to roll it back.
I don't think anybody's gonna take this seriously.
I love a good bit. I love
you do, and you have some good bits.
Thank you.
So any final thoughts?
No, I've really enjoyed this. It's great to see you. It looks like you're, winter alabaster's coming in beautifully. Good for you. Staying inside.
Thank you. You too. Thanks for listening. Check us out on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. And if you think about it, subscribe, or we'd love to hear from you if you have a comment. Next week, we do Barney and the Cave Rescue. Until then, Christopher, where's your patula obligata?
It's in my shoulder.